Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the 33 Fuel podcast. My name is Warren. I'm one of the co-founders here at 33 Fuel, and today we are going into the world of golf with strength and conditioning coach Jamie Greaves. Now, don't freak out. I did just say golf, but bear with me because seriously, if you're like me and you don't have an extensive golfing background, golf conjures up some pretty standard stereotypes. We're talking not very fit, probably overweight, older people meandering around some nice golf course somewhere before going back to the clubhouse to drink too much and eat too much and possibly fall asleep in front of the TV when they get home. It's not where you imagine the cutting edge of fitness and all those other things may be. It's also not where you imagine you probably get a whole load of value if you weren't a golfer. But this is where you would be so wrong. And this is why I'm really excited to have Jamie on the show, right? Because he has a high-level background in golf, but also has a high-level background and expertise in strength and conditioning. And what he unpacks so brilliantly within the course of this chat is, first of all, quite how serious golf is as a physical activity if you want to be good at it. That is something, I'm not going to spoil that. That's coming up right at the beginning of the show. Even if you only listen for that bit alone, you'll be astonished to find out quite the power and forces involved in getting a golf ball to do what a professional golf player will make it do. But beyond that, he goes deep into the value of building a proper foundation for your fitness. Think of your fitness as a pyramid. In Jamie's words, the top little pointy part of that pyramid is the sport-specific work you need to do physically and mentally in order to excel in your chosen sport. But the bottom bit of that pyramid, the big bit that keeps it all up, that's the foundational work that's applicable across almost any sport. And the work there, particularly as amateur athletes, the work there is the place we are most likely to be neglecting. Neglect that and you can't build your pyramid strong. Okay, so this podcast is full of lessons how to build a strong fitness base for your own performance. Also, how to get the most out of the least amount of training to make that happen. The value of simplicity within your training. We're so often looking for the new thing, the complex thing. Jamie will tell us it's all about getting the simple things right. On top of that, the values of building happiness and the values of embracing pain and when you should use those two. So as you can see, tons coming up here. And I absolutely love it because it completely fits and fulfills our mission here at 33 Fuel, which is simply to give athletes of all levels in all sports the very best tools for their health, their well-being and their performance, the things that will allow them to take their game to the next level, whatever level that may be. And we do that through sharing brilliant conversations and content like this across our social media, our podcasts and our vlogs. And of course, are the base of our pyramid. What we build all of this on at 33 Fuel is what we do in store, where we make and sell the best possible natural sports nutrition for your performance today and your health tomorrow, because these things are the same. If you don't believe health and performance are related, just try going running with a cold and see how that feels. Anyway, look, you should check us out. The products are all in store at 33fuel.com. Do check those out. But whatever you do, do not go away before you've checked out this podcast with Jamie Greaves. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for coming on the show and for, I think, what is going to be a great conversation, which opens up so many different avenues, but specifically, I'm sure there will be a number of people scratching their heads about the idea of golf and serious levels of fitness commitment, strength conditioning and nutrition and so on. So I just wanted to sort of open that one up for you about maybe you could give us a little bit of your background, how you came into the world of golf, and then let's go into that question of, how serious a sport is golf in terms of its physical demands on the body.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this chat. So my background has been in golf since kind of the age of 8 or 9. I was kind of very athletic, played pretty much every sport going. And then found out that I was kind of pretty good at golf. I ended up going to America, playing golf, kind of college level golf in America, which is where I first got exposed to kind of strength and conditioning and how beneficial it can be for golf. And then since I've come back, it's something that I've kind of gone into a little bit more, and it's now the route that I go down. So I'm a golf-specific strength and conditioning coach. I only work with golfers, helping golfers of kind of all ages, all abilities, to improve their performance using strength and conditioning. And it's, like you say, it's something that a lot of people maybe raise their eyebrows at when they see kind of golf strength and conditioning, because golf maybe still has this perception of not being the most athletic sport out there. It often gets grouped with some other sports like snooker or darts, which maybe don't require much athleticism. Whereas I would argue that actually golf is a very athletic sport. Obviously, the motion is very athletic. You're out on a golf course for 4.5 hours, which is generally low conditioned walking. So there's not much of a conditioning element to golf, but the actual motion itself is one of the most explosive and three-dimensional movements in all of sport. So if you're looking at a professional golfer, actually this week there was a golfer called Bryson DeChambeau who was swinging a golf club at around 132 mile an hour. So that golf club at the top of his backswing is stationary. It's 0 mile an hour. It's going to go from 0 to 130 mile an hour in about 0.2 of a second. And then it's going to be back to 0 again within a second. So here you have a human being swinging an implement from 0 to 130 mile an hour back to 0 again in less than a second. So to me, that's quite an athletic motion. Even your regular amateur golfer is going to be swinging 0 to 90, 0 to 100 and back down to 0 again in less than a second. So when people say it's not an athletic motion, you're generating huge amounts of force. You're using every muscle, every joint in the body in all 3 planes of motion. You're generating about 8 times body weight through the lower back during the swing, which is obviously far higher than some other sports. And it's very fast and it's very repetitive. So to me, although there might not be the impact that you may have, say, on sports like rugby, it's still an athletic motion and it needs to be treated that way.
And I think that puts it in such a brilliant context. You know, the forces the body is creating and managing and absorbing within a golf swing are extreme. And not only that, they are, if you want to compete seriously at this, then you are repeating that motion over and over again. And I remember when you first were explaining these stats to me when we spoke last week, the golf is rare in sport in that it is it's a very unusual motion, and you're going to repeat it thousands of times throughout your career or lifetime. Similar to, the only other one I could come up with was like a fast bowler in cricket. Maybe baseball pitchers, the same thing, but very unusual demands upon the body. And whereas, casually pottering around on the golf course of an afternoon, once a month is not going to be an issue. If you want to take it seriously, you're asking a lot of your body.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a highly, highly repetitive move, and it is a very unnatural move. So obviously, baseball pitchers are kind of in the same zone in that it's a very repetitive kind of motion. But throwing a ball is actually quite a natural move. Swinging a golf club is probably something that's a little bit unnatural. So your average person could pick up a ball and throw it. Swinging a golf club requires obviously learning the motion, learning the skill. It's not something we're naturally maybe inclined to do. And so probably the body is even more kind of susceptible to these overuse injuries because it's just not a natural move. It's not something the body's really designed to do. And like you say, you're swinging the same way, using all those forces hundreds of times a day, in some cases, and that's bound to take quite a toll on the body unless you're kind of trying to put measures in place so that body can meet the demands that you're putting upon it.
I think it's brilliant, and I think it just what I really liked about when we spoke off air and when we originally met and went through this stuff. What I really like is whereas your work, your background and your work is specifically golf focused, the value in the way that you are thinking and the way that you're looking to manage athletes and the body, I think can apply to there are lessons to be learned for so many different athletes and sports. The other one that struck me is people raise their eyes when you say well, I'm a golf strength and conditioning coach. That you're sort of pushing back a little boundary there. It's the same way that if you go to Pro Tour cycling, then everyone laughed at Team Sky when they started jumping on trainer bikes at the end of a race to warm down. Everyone thought they were crazy. Well, now everyone is doing it. Go back to Formula One, Ayrton Senna. People thought he was a bit nuts because he looked after his diet and he did training other than just driving the car. He did physical training to be a driver, whether it was aerobic or strength-based. Now, of course, that's the bread and butter of Formula One. It seems like you're crossing a similar boundary in the world of golf.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always kind of these pioneers in sport that change it. And I think in golf, there has been people down the years that have taken their fitness seriously. If you go back, there was Gary Player, and then kind of in the 80s and 90s, there was Greg Norman. And both of these took their fitness a lot more serious than the competition. But I think in terms of golf, the person that really changed it was Tiger Woods. So when Tiger Woods came out in the late 1990s, by the early 2000s, he was training quite often. I mean, people often use Tiger Woods, his training and the fact that he's suffered so many injuries down the line as almost the reason kind of not to train for golf. But Tiger was, because he was the first, he probably made quite a lot of mistakes. I think he's just recently admitted he made quite a lot of mistakes in how he approached training for golf and the fact that he overdid it. But he was the one that kind of really brought it to the forefront. So if you went back to the early 2000s in golf, you had Tiger Woods and Vijay Singh, who were world number 1 and 2. And they were probably the only two people doing strength training for golf. So you had maybe the only two people doing strength training were number 1 and 2 in the world. Now, I'm not saying they were number 1 and 2 in the world because they were doing strength training, because they were phenomenal golfers. But people started to see that this strength training fitness could actually have a benefit to people's golf games, because probably for the most part, even some of the professionals that were out on tour didn't really see the value in it. And then as we started learning more and more about it, We have the golf coaches, the technology from the golf coaches now, where they're able to put kind of 3D images of people. They're able to measure forces in the swing, how they use the ground. So all this technology has enabled us to see why the longest players are the longest players, so why they hit the ball the furthest. And you start to see that it comes down to how much force they put into the ground. And then the strength coaches are like, well, if force into the ground means you hit the ball further, that's obviously quite a trainable thing in the gym, because a lot of lower body strength and power exercises require huge amounts of force into the ground. And it's kind of escalated from there. And obviously Tiger, as well as being a phenomenal golfer, he changed the sport quite dramatically, particularly in the money that's now in it. So now when you look at kind of the top earners in all of sport, for a long time Tiger was at the top. I think Tiger and Floyd Mayweather for kind of about 10, 12 years were pretty much interchanged about who was number one. Which obviously, if you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old, you're growing up and you're very athletic, you're looking to play professional sports, one of the big things is, where's the money at? Particularly in America, it used to be you wanted to play basketball or you wanted to play American football. Whereas now it's, well, you could play golf. You could earn a lot more money potentially if you got into the world's top 5, top 10 in golf. And we've had that. We've seen that in recent years. There was the US Open champion from last year, Gary Woodland. He had a basketball scholarship, I believe, at university, and then came out of university as a professional golfer. Because obviously we're recognizing that these athletic demands that are maybe in other sports. So obviously basketball requires huge amounts of vertical force for the jumping. So if someone is able to express a lot of vertical force playing basketball, they probably have a fair chance of being able to hit the golf ball a long way. So there's lots of different avenues now that kind of people are going down with kind of golf.
It sounds like, I love that sort of following the money idea, and from what I've heard of, certainly we've been some American universities who we've been talking to and working with their sports teams. They often mention, the director of sport, whatever. So, we have a golf team, or we have this team, and I'd never really registered until now. You'd assume, well, American universities, they're so big, they have so many different sports. Yes, of course they would have a golf team. It must be a sort of fringe thing. I'm sure most universities in the UK do, but actually, that point that's now a compelling feeder system, because why would you not want to get involved in that? And then there's a potential sports career at the end of it if people want to take it to that level. But also, you're talking about transferable skill. If you have this ability to really put a lot of force into the ground, well, that's trainable. There's a lot of sports that would do that. There are crossover skills. I wonder, does this relate to one of the other points that you mentioned earlier, that kind of, even though your work is specific to golf, the majority of training that you need to do for sport is kind of the same across a lot of sports. There's a lot of crossover between them, and maybe a lot of the distinctions that are apparently existing in training are perhaps even more a dimension of marketing than they are a real benefit to the specific training for that sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd 100% kind of go along with that. So I like to say that I specialize in golfers and I train golfers because I know the sport, I know the people. I'm able to relate very well to my clients because I've been there. I know the struggles of golf. I've been fortunate enough to play it at a pretty high level. And then I've also, as I've become more into training and started to play golf less and less, start to empathize more with the people that struggle with golf as well, because it's quite a hard sport when you don't play it very often, which is quite nice in that I'm able to kind of empathize with the people at the top and also maybe some of the higher handicappers as well. But in terms of if I wasn't specializing in golf, I think a lot of what I do with my golfers would carry over to pretty much every other sport. Essentially, if you've got good range of motion, particularly through the hips, the spine and the shoulders, you're able to express movement in multiple planes of direction. You're strong in basic fundamental movements such as squats, deadlifts, single leg work, pushes and pulls. So kind of those basic movement patterns. If you're able to express strength in those movements and those movements look good, and then you're able to express power or speed, those are going to be kind of very tangible attributes to near enough every sport out there. So to me, the specific element only really comes in kind of, maybe if you looked at it as kind of like a pyramid, the top part is kind of your sport specific, but the base of just kind of good movement, good range of motion, good strength, and the ability to express power pretty much covers the majority of sports, really.
That sounds so good, because effectively at the bottom of the pyramid there, and the pyramid's a great analogy, because if you can't have the top of the pyramid if you don't have the bottom. The top has nothing to sit on. And I think particularly in the amateur sports space, a lot of us would get into a sport, whether it's running or cycling or CrossFit, whatever it may be, you get into sport X. And so naturally you train and do that sport, but injuries come up or barriers come up where, you can't achieve the next level that you're looking to achieve, because ultimately the bottom of the pyramid isn't there, or a piece of it is missing. And that core strength, power, movement, fluidity, flexibility, and all of those other things, unless you've got that solid base, you can't build any major sporting forms. You could get a little bit down the line, and there will always be natural outliers who are simply naturally suited to the sport which they're doing, both genetically and physically, who will get further. But I think everyone could benefit from having that strong base, and then you fine tune specific to your sport.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that I would say maybe golf specific fitness has probably done wrong over the years, is the aim to kind of get to that top bit of the pyramid too quickly, mainly because it's a perception. They feel like that's what people think golf fitness should be. So they're trying to do moves in the gym that maybe replicate the golf swing. They're trying to make things look like the golf swing. So that there can be a time and place for those kind of more ultra specific movements. But if you're doing movements like that and you can't do a deadlift with your body weight, for example, or you can't do some push-ups, you can't rotate your torso kind of 45, 50 degrees to the right, but you're doing kind of golf specific work in the gym, to me, you're kind of missing the point there. Get yourself some good movement first. And then once you start dialing in the basics and you've got the basics good, then obviously we can start looking at some more kind of specific movements on top of that. But I think most people, particularly most kind of amateurs that I work with in terms of golf, they actually get a lot of transfer over into their golf game from just getting some better movement, getting a bit stronger and getting a bit more powerful. We don't even sometimes need to get into the really specific stuff for them to get a really nice transfer over.
That's
and
great.
I think that Yeah, it's something that can be applied to kind of other sports as well. Really, it's good movement and kind of expressing power and being strong is they're never bad things. They should all. I would say you probably always want to have at least have the basics in the back of your mind. Anyway, they're the basics for a reason. You probably want to get good at them, and then you can kind of build off them.
It's like that, going back to first principles, really, and exactly as you said there, unless if you can't move, certainly turn your torso 45, 50 degrees to the right and the left, well, that's not a full range of motion for your golf swing. And I love that point there, the basics for a reason, you should probably be good at them. I think if people take nothing else from this podcast, that's a huge one. And the fact that for, a lot of people doing sport recreationally, even if they take it really seriously, there's a temptation to look forward. Right, what's the next, how much more weight can I lift, or how much further can I run, or how much faster can I swim, whatever it might be. Whereas, and so you're looking for the gains there, and certainly the media will supply an awful lot of professional tips and things, so you can constantly be looking forward. But not that can stop you from looking back and looking at these foundational blocks. And if they're not there, you can't be your best at your sport, no matter what level you're trying to be at. So, I mean, in terms of those key basics, what do you think are the most important areas that people, whether it's golf or any other sport, whether they're running or they're crossfitting, whatever they might be, what do you think? Where do you see those really beginner basics that everyone should have down really tight and really sharp to give them a further performance lift?
Yeah, so especially when I'm looking at golf, obviously, like I mentioned, power out of the ground is so important. I like to firstly make sure someone squat is quite good. Now, when I say I like to get someone squatting, people think, oh, they've got to have a bar on their back. It's got to be a back squat with a bar. To me, a barbell back squat is an exercise. A squat is a pattern. I think there's quite a big distinction there. So I think in terms of patterns. So I like to get someone squatting. If they're new, that might be a goblet squat. It might be a front squat. Could be a back squat. I think the back squat's a fantastic exercise. It might be a safety bar squat. I like to find an appropriate exercise within the kind of the umbrella of that exercise pattern. So every golfer that I train is doing squats, every single one. Even if they have limited ankle range or they have kind of limited hip range, they might be doing a box squat. They will be doing some kind of squat, because to me it's a fundamental movement. It's brilliant for strength. We can generate power from it. It also doubles up as fantastic mobility work for our ankles, our hips, our thoracic spine, depending on the variation, shoulders as well. So you're getting a lot of kind of bang for your buck in one movement, really. And I have those kind of movement patterns. So I like to see someone can do a hinge movement pattern. So obviously, probably the most well-known hinge movement pattern would be the barbell deadlift from the floor. That's actually an exercise I don't have many people perform, mainly because they can't probably do it through the range of motion, keeping the angles that I would like. So I would quite often do a trap bar deadlift with my golfers. It's far easier to learn. It generally looks a lot better, and they're able to lift a little bit more weight.
So sorry, what's the difference with those two movements? Because in my understanding, the deadlift is simply you're hinging at the waist, and you're lifting the bar from the weight from the floor straight up, right in front of your body, straight up, and you're just lifting from the waist and the back to bring it up.
Yeah.
And then you stop when you're upright. So I mean, in essence, is that the basic deadlift? And if it is, how does this differ?
So a hinge movement pattern or a deadlift movement pattern, you're going to be pushing the hips back, and then obviously hands are going to be on the bar, and then you're going to be pushing your feet through the floor, almost like you're trying to push a hole through the floor, and then your hips are going to kind of, I like to say, kind of belt buckle to the wall in front. So kind of driving that belt buckle through the wall in front to stand up, basically. But a trap bar deadlift is normally the handles are higher, so you don't have to go down as far. So then, obviously, that reduces the range of motion a little bit, which makes it, for most people, where they probably get into trouble on setting up for a deadlift is the last kind of 10-20%. So because the trap bar handles are a little bit higher, they don't have to go into that kind of zone. So their angles at setup all look a little bit better. Also, the trap bar handles are out to the side. It's like a specialized bar. So the handles are out to the side, which again just kind of puts people in a little bit of a better position. And because of all that, they're generally able to lift a little bit more weight. And my view on this is we are not power lifters. So the barbell back squat, the barbell deadlift from the floor, and the barbell bench press are probably the three most well-known exercises because they're powerlifting. They're powerlifting movements. If you want to compete in powerlifting, you have to do those three movements. You can't do a trap bar deadlift in a powerlift meet. But if you're not competing at powerlifting, you can still get all the benefits that those exercises provide using slightly different variations of them, but may suit you better. And that's what I try and get across to the golfers that I work with, but I suppose athletes in general, is why are you doing the movement? What's the intent of the movement? So when I'm doing a deadlift movement with a golfer, I am trying to get them to express force down into the floor. So if I can get them to express more force down into the floor by using a slightly easier variation of the exercise, why wouldn't I do that? Why would I try and force them into a deadlift from the floor with a bar just because that's the exercise that they would need to do if they were competing in powerlifting, which they're not. So to me, it's why are you doing an exercise? Any exercise you have in your program, regardless of whether you're a golfer or not, I would say every exercise in your program, you should know why it's in there. If you don't know why it's in there, it probably shouldn't be in there. We have this mentality of more is better. So people are always trying to add more exercises, come up with new exercises, like new inventions of exercises. Whereas I would actually say probably a lot of the top strength and conditioning coaches, certainly some of the people that I would look up to, they will often talk about trying to get rid of the waste. Like, what can we get rid of in this exercise program? Like, is it actually that beneficial, or can we get rid of it? They're trying to strip back exercise programs. Again, so that each exercise has a purpose, and it's not just in there because you think it should be in there. It's you know why it's in there.
That's great, and it reminds me of a podcast I did recently, actually, with Hayden Allen. If anyone wants to check it out, he's an endurance physiologist and also a high-level cyclist himself. And one of the things he's found is that, again, stripping that, his cycling training is incredibly simple in many ways, in that he does 90% or so of his training at a very, very gentle level. And actually the challenge there is going slow enough, he says. But then 10% of it is absolutely, well, it's absolute eyes out brutal. So you have to balance the two together. But there's almost no more to it than that. that's so simple. You'd think things should be much more technical, and you need different progressions and different days and this, that, and the other. But really, the hardest thing for him is actually sort of psychologically and mentally sticking to the simplicity and believing in the process and the results. And it sounds like you take a similar approach to all of the training that you do for your athletes, in that what's the purpose of this, and if you can't answer that question clearly, then it's a very strong hard look at that to go, well, should that element even be in the training program? And it sounds like that's something you'd advise to people in any sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people, they greatly undervalue simplicity. Just because something is simple doesn't mean it's not very, very useful. And we're in a rush, especially in kind of like today's world, like social media world. I know from posting on my social media, a simple exercise done well probably isn't going to get quite as much attention as someone doing a kind of mimicking a golf swing whilst wearing a band, whilst they're holding one of those core vibrators stood on a ball. Like that's going to do really well on social media, but to me it's a pretty pointless exercise. Whereas obviously a video of someone doing a well executed squat probably isn't going to get that much attention. There's this kind of mindset out of there that everything needs to look kind of cool and fashionable, whereas actually just keeping it simple and getting really good at the basics will be really useful for most people. And I find for my athletes, it helps them maybe from a commitment point of view, is that firstly, I always like to educate them. So I would hope if you asked any of my clients a question on why they're doing a certain exercise, they would be able to explain to you why they're doing it, what they're looking for, what benefits that will have for golf performance and maybe their overall health as well. So I'm not a trainer that you do it and then you don't have no knowledge of it. I like to kind of educate my clients on why they're doing something, because I always feel if they understand the reason behind an exercise and they know why it's so beneficial to them and they can explain that, they're more likely to do it.
Because they understand
because they know why doing this set of squats is going to be so useful to them. They know why squats are so useful. So when they see it in their program, even if maybe they don't like it, if they know the benefits and the reasons behind it and my thought process behind why I'm asking them to do it, I would say they're more inclined to stick to the program.
It makes a lot of sense. If you have that, I think there's in any training program, it's easy to show up and do the work on day 1, week 1, week 2, week 3, but it's weeks 10, weeks 20, week 50, where you need a little more in the locker to push you through that, or at least to tell you why you're doing it, rather than simply showing up and doing the new thing, which also plays into I love your point on the social media side, that if you put something up really, really technical, unusual looking and even potentially useless, it might go down really well on social media. But if you put up something incredibly simple and brilliant and of value to everybody, people might go, well, I've sort of seen it before, without really engaging as much with it. Do you think that alongside simplicity being underrated, consistency can also be undervalued? The fact that you don't just have to do these things once. You have to do the simple things well, and you have to do them over and over and over again. And that's ultimately what compounds into greatness. Greatness is no one sudden overnight thing. It's a lot of simple things done well over a long period of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So probably some of my clients would get a bit fed up with me saying consistency is key or consistency is king. To me, the consistent element of doing things over and over and over again are what gets results. People, they have this kind of all or nothing mentality. We see it in training. Obviously, probably the most common one is January. Everyone, obviously, Christmas, New Year, they haven't really done much. They've ate quite a lot of stuff, probably not the best stuff either. And then they have this New Year's mentality of, I'm going to join a gym, I'm going to get fitter, I'm going to go on a diet. And they go from kind of 0 to 100 mile an hour overnight. And it's just not sustainable. They might be able to do it for a week, 2 weeks. If they've got quite a lot of willpower, they might be able to do it for a month or two. But the chances are by next Christmas, next New Year, they're going to be saying the same thing. I'm going to be getting back on it in January and restarting. And it's the consistency element to it. It needs to be, to me, it needs to be something that you could do for the rest of your life. So if you're doing a program or you've got kind of your nutrition and you're looking at it today and you think, yeah, there's a fair chance that I can't do that for the rest of my life, then it's probably a little bit too much. It might be too unsustainable for you. So quite a lot of my golfers would actually maybe be surprised at almost how little they do, potentially in season as well. So when they're in season, their programs are very, very minimal. Something called minimal dose effect in strength and conditioning. So it's basically about doing the bare minimum to maintain what gains we've made in the off season. Because obviously when they're in season, they're playing events, they're traveling, they've got stress of competing. They're probably not sleeping that great because they're in hotels. But even your average golfer that's maybe not doing that, they're playing a lot more. They've probably got weekend competitions. There's a lot of stuff going on, and their training needs to accommodate that. I don't want them to feel like they have to spend an hour and a half in the gym every day, because they're not going to do that. That's just not sustainable. Whereas they can actually get a lot from kind of free 30-minute sessions a week done with minimum dose effect. But it goes back to people's mindset of we're very all or nothing. We have, if I'm going to commit to this, I'm going to do it properly, which is great. But then if they miss a week or they're doing it for maybe nutrition and they have that blowout meal where it goes wrong, what often happens in an all or nothing mentality is they just fall off the bandwagon completely, and that all that 2 weeks or months of good work gets completely undone, and that they're back to square one. Whereas I'd rather take a more long-term kind of sustainable approach to my training with golfers and get them kind of in the gym, get them consistently building up, and then if they want to and they feel comfortable and they can add another session or take that 30 minutes up to maybe 40, 45 minutes, because they've built these blocks now where they're consistently doing it, they enjoy it, that it's in their routine. It's much easier to then add a little bit on than it is to have that kind of going from 0 to 100 all the time.
And that you make a really strong and attractive case there as well for, 3 times 30 minutes on strength in a week or on strength and conditioning in a week. That's not an onerous amount by any stretch. That's very achievable. Whereas if people do come at it from an all or nothing mindset, there is that idea. It's such a classic in running. It's that I'm going to get fit, I'm going to run every day. That's the worst thing most people or anyone could do. Even a professional runner would think twice about that. That is a huge strain on your body very quickly, and the likelihood is, unless you are quite a genetic or physical outlier, it's going to quickly lead to injury, which suddenly means you've only got to miss one day, and suddenly the idea of running every day is out. And there you go. You're as you said, you're off the bandwagon. Whereas a smaller, minimal effective dose, like half an hour, again, half an hour 3 times a week, and that can be truly beneficial, and that can really ramp up benefits over time, and also allow you to build the base of your pyramid. I mean, I know with your professional athletes, you're working in an off-season period to focus much more heavily on the base of that pyramid, and then allow them to maintain during the season. But do you think for most athletes or recreational athletes in general, even the ones at the serious level, that 3 sessions, half an hour a week can really reap dividends? And if it can, what do you think those sessions should look like?
Yeah, absolutely. People can make some huge improvements in kind of 3 sessions, 30 minutes a week. It's one of the big kind of things that I have, concerns that I have, maybe golfers have, is when I talk to them about golf strength and conditioning, is time. They say, I don't have the time to work out an hour, 90 minutes every day. And I'm like, well, you don't have to. I don't want you to work out an hour every day. I said, do you have the time to work out 3 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes? And they're actually quite surprised. They're like, well, what's that going to do? And I'm like, well, you can make a lot of progress in an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of exercise a week done properly. So obviously, if you're going to be doing those kind of short sessions, you would really want to prioritize the movements that are going to give you the most benefit. So probably if you're going to do half an hour, maybe bicep curls and tricep push downs probably aren't going to be near the top of my list. You'd want to be doing the compound movements that are really going to hit most of the body. So again, that's coming back to those kind of basic movements of, you'd want to be filling those sessions with kind of squat movements, deadlift movements, pushes, pulls, movements that require a lot of muscle and joint throughout the whole body. They're going to have the added benefit of, because you're recruiting a lot of the system, they're going to be quite good for your kind of that fat loss angle, because you're going to be required a lot of kind of energy to move these kind of things, because you're looking at the whole body. So although I train golfers from a performance standpoint, obviously everyone that sees me wants to play better golf. I think it's another area that often gets overlooked, is we focus too much on the sport specific side of it, and we just forget the general health benefits exercise brings as well. So most people, yes, they want to play, they want to hit the ball further, they want to shoot lower scores on the golf course, but they also probably want to have a bit more muscle mass, maybe lose a little bit of body fat percentage, look a bit better, feel a little bit more confident in their self, all those kind of health benefits that exercise brings as well. So I think it's important that we recognize them as well, and not just focus on all the golf or the sport specific side of it. So when we're doing those compound movements in the gym and we're getting stronger and we're using movements that involve the whole body, we're going to be helping that body composition, and we're going to be helping these people look and feel better.
And there's a huge value to all of that, because if it's something that just puts a little bit of a spring back in your step, and those, you're right, those all-round health benefits. If the day looks a little brighter, you have a little bit more spring in your step, you feel better in yourself. Well, those are all naturally produced performance enhancers that you've just added to your game, to your life. In your case, specifically into your golf, they're key parts of the base of that pyramid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're I mean, golf is obviously probably one of the most confidence-reliant sports out there. You're on the golf course for 4.5, maybe even 5 hours. You're not actually hitting that many shots. Most of it is walking between shots, where there's a fair lot of time for you to have kind of negative self-talk. So if you're on that golf course and you've been training and you look better, you feel better, you're standing a bit taller, you're a bit prouder to be out there, that could potentially have as well as all the health benefits that obviously that's going to bring, it could help performance as well, because a happier, healthier golfer that's a little bit more confident in themselves is probably going to perform a little bit better on the golf course without doing anything different.
That's a brilliant point, and again, I think it goes back to the core of what you've really been talking about here, for sure. And the more you want to specialise and improve in a sport, you do need to look forward and find those sport-specific elements. Where is that last 0.5%? Where's the next one of those? But you can't do that without putting the base of the pyramid in place and addressing that as well, and making sure that is consistently fed and watered and strong, and that plays into every element of your game. I love that point about making someone happier. It's hugely underrated. It's crazy. Happiness is just about all that any of us really want out of life anyway, and yet when we focus down on performance or skills or sport, happiness can be overlooked. A key part, if you can increase that 1%, I mean, the value of that to your overall game and everything else you do is huge.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's something that I look to get across in my training, is people, they push themselves maybe so hard in the gym, and that's where that kind of sustainability comes in, is you need to kind of, I know obviously not everyone enjoys weight training and strength, not everyone enjoys it, but you need to find things in the gym that preferentially you enjoy, but at least you can tolerate. So I would say you don't want to be dreading going to the gym. If you're dreading going to the gym, you probably want to be thinking about what other things in the gym can I do in my program, so that I'm more inclined to go to the gym, or more inclined to do my exercises. Because at the end of the day, most people, minus maybe the top end that are doing it for kind of because they're professional athletes. If you're a professional athlete, you kind of have no choice really. You have to put the fitness work in. But for your average person that is maybe they're doing their sport, they want to improve their sport, they know that if they do some fitness work that will help, they're probably better off picking fitness work that they enjoy, that they're more likely to go back to, exercises that suit them. And that's where, again, links into what I said earlier about people kind of getting too attached to certain exercises. I've had a lot of people that tell me they don't like squats. I can't squat. I don't enjoy squats. I don't like them. I can't do them. They hurt. And I ask them what they do, and 100% of the time it will be, I done a back squat with a bar. And you give that person a safety bar or something. So a safety bar is like a back squat bar, but it has handles that come out in front. So it's kind of like a mix between a back squat and a front squat. You hand them that bar and get them squatting, and suddenly they're like, well, this one doesn't hurt and it feels better, and their confidence goes up. And then because they're moving better and it feels okay, suddenly now you have an exercise that they actually want to do and they enjoy doing because they can see the progress. So it's a case of not being too attached to certain exercises and just thinking about patterns and exploring things as well. So as much as I am a fan of kind of the basics having their part, and they should always be something you refer back to. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of a play around in the gym and having like this exploration of movement and almost just kind of messing around with it. Often that's when a lot of my new exercises that are actually I use with clients, that's where I come up with them, is when I'm maybe towards the back end of a session and I'm starting to get a little bit maybe bored and I don't really want to be there. So I just think, well, why don't for the next 5 or 10 minutes I just grab a kettlebell and just do some movements with it and just see what I come up with. And that's often when I come up with some of my best new exercises is during that time. So I think people need to remember that, yes, they're doing it for sports performance. Yes, they're doing it for the health benefits, but you kind of want to try and make it as fun as possible. And that's going to help you keep it a bit more consistent as well.
That's great to hear that, opening up that idea of, it shouldn't always be a grind. And if it feels like a grind at times, then why not break it up? Why not freestyle it, do something different? I love that you find that to actually be a valuable creative space where you can find things that you didn't know before. But on the other end of that, I've been reading Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, recently, which is it's a very interesting read for anyone who's into just examining pain and discomfort and seeing if there's value in it. On the other end of the process, are there times you think where people do need to push through a little pain and discomfort in the early stages of something new, or even when they've hit a plateau? And if so, how would you advise people manage the balance between when to, no, I've just got to get my head down and push through this even though I don't enjoy it because there's something valuable on the other side, versus I need to keep this training fresh and enjoyable, otherwise I simply won't show up, and that's going to affect consistency, which is ultimately going to derail the whole process?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a balance in everything, really. And sometimes I'm not kind of against people grinding and really working hard in the gym. There's a time and a place for that, absolutely. Like you were referring to earlier, that kind of 90%, they were taking it easy, and then 10%, obviously, they were really going for it. Where people get into trouble, I would say, is when they're going for it all the time, and they're just every single session they're beating themselves up in the gym. That kind of thing isn't really sustainable. But certainly sessions or blocks of training where you really are going to go for it a little bit harder, and it doesn't really matter if you push yourself. So that's where, from my point of view with golfers, that tends to be maybe more in the off season for people. So if I have a golfer, they're in the off season, they come in for a session. If I work them really hard and they struggle the next day, so they've got DOMs, they're not really feeling great the next day, it's not the end of the world because they're not competing. They probably wouldn't have done much anyway. Whereas obviously, if I do that to them in season, they might have an event the next day, or they might need to be having a serious block of practice, and now they can't move. So that's obviously from an athlete point of view, that's where most of those kind of sessions where we really go for it would happen in the off season. But in terms of pain, I certainly think, pain is incredibly complex. Anyone that kind of says they understand pain fully, probably I'd question them quite a lot. It's something that we're learning about all the time. But pain can be useful. It's maybe not as needed to be feared as what maybe some people are led to believe. So there's people out there that will say if a movement brings any pain at all, then you should stop. Whereas I would say, there's some mild discomfort from time to time is maybe not actually the end of the world, and it can actually be useful. And certainly if you're new to kind of strength and conditioning, or new to fitness, or whatever you're doing, if you're in that in those early stages, most of what you do might be a bit of a struggle. It's probably not going to come that easy to you, and that's where you need to be appropriate in your programming and appreciating that this person may be struggling with the exercises because it's new. They've got a lot going on. They maybe don't feel that great over the exercises. So if they're feeling that way, probably pushing them isn't the smartest thing to start with. Just appreciating that they're struggling with it, but trying to encourage them to work through it, because once they work through it, these exercises are going to become easier for them. And then obviously you can start to build off that.
And is there also an element in that process, and you would see this specifically with golfers, but I think it could be for any sport, if you have developed a skill, where you have taken the time, and golf, as you made the point so clearly at the beginning, is a skill. It is not a natural movement. You have to go, right, you will turn up on day one and you will just not be able to do it, right? You're then going to have to take the time to learn. You've got to go through that beginner's phase. You've got to go through the discomfort of not knowing what to do, not knowing how to hold a club. You see everyone else looking natural, you don't. But over time, you become a golfer, and you now have an element of skill and comfort in your environment, and you've developed. So at that point, you're now a long way advanced from where you were as a beginner, and that applies, I think, in any sport. Windsurfing, rock climbing, running, cycling, doesn't matter. You get to a point where you are now a cyclist or a runner or a climber, or in this case, a golfer. So there's a proficiency and a comfort. Now you have to take that same person and go, now we're going to introduce strength and conditioning work. They've got to walk into a gym. They don't know what the machines are. They're right back to that point in the golfing case of like someone's just put a club in their hand for the first day and they feel a bit stupid and they can't work around it. It's uncomfortable. It's weird. How do you deal with that barrier, and how do you advise people in general deal with those barriers where there is a benefit to be had by going through that pain, but it can be difficult mentally because you become proficient in something and you have to go right back to being a bit of a muppet and not knowing what you're doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say, certainly from my experience, that tends to happen a lot more maybe with the athletes, some of the better athletes, and some of the better golfers, because obviously if they play golf professionally, they're used to being good at something, and then suddenly they come into an environment that's new to them, and they maybe don't know what they're doing, and now they're not the best at it. They don't really know much, and that can be quite difficult for people. I would suggest for most people, if they're new to an environment such as the gym, is trying to find someone they trust to help them on that journey, especially at the start, whether that be a coach or whether that be someone that they maybe like a friend that they know who is experienced in it, because it can be quite an intimidating place. Going into that environment, if you're not very sure on what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's what can happen quite a lot. Certainly in this kind of New Year's thing that I was talking about earlier, is a lot of people, they maybe have the best intentions to go in and start getting stronger. And they go into the gym, and there's people in there, like you say, they all know what they're doing. Maybe they've been in the gym for a while. They're looking kind of quite muscly. They're quite strong. And then people, they don't want to go into that area as the newbie that doesn't really know what they're doing. and then they kind of drift into, maybe they'll pick a machine like a treadmill or something, because that's quite a safe thing to be on. They know what they're doing there. They then maybe go on a few more times, use a couple of the cardio pieces of equipment, and then probably by February that gym membership has maybe been cancelled. Whereas if they even just initially got themselves a coach, someone, and specifically said, I want to learn and be educated on strength movements. I want to know how to use the dumbbells, how to use the barbells, so that they can kind of gain confidence with the coach. And it doesn't have to be something that is like ongoing forever. And then once they build that confidence up, so that now they feel like they can go in on their own and actually go into that area and not be intimidated by the people around them, because they've got their program, they know what they're doing, they know how to use the machines, they know how to use the weights, they know that their movements are looking reasonable because they've had their coach watch them, and suddenly now they're able to kind of go into that area themselves and kind of progress from there. But you're right, it's quite whenever you're new to something, and when you're maybe not very good at it, and you're intimidated by other people, it can be quite a tough place to be. Certainly if you were just taking up golf and you were maybe on a driving range, you probably, it's quite hard for that person that's watching everyone else hit the ball in the air and it's going straight, or maybe they're next to someone that's pretty good and they're hitting drivers a long way, and then you're the person stood there and you don't know which end of the club to hold, and you're taking swings and missing the ball and stuff, and you always feel like people are watching you. Whereas if that person got themselves a golf coach and started to learn some basics, maybe even got a lot of coaches obviously have separate areas, whether that be on a driving range or in a gym. They normally have like more private areas you can go to where you're away from the onlookers of everyone else, and actually start to learn your skill there and develop that confidence. And then when you're ready, you can kind of start to do it by yourself a little bit more.
And just coming back to something you mentioned earlier about, we were talking about the value of happiness, but then you also made some great points around the value of pain, and that it's not something to be shied away from. In a sporting sense and a training sense, pain is often considered physical, and that is a key part of it. Muscle pain, soreness, pushing through, endurance, whatever it may be. But I think there's also a mental pain element, and in this case, it's the discomfort of trying something new, or having to put yourself in a place where you are the beginner, not the person who knows what they're doing. Do you think that those types of pain are actually a sort of a sign of growth? Those are the places where you're really able to accelerate some growth, because it is something you've never done before, or that is new and uncomfortable.
Yeah, you'll often hear a lot of athletes particularly talk about they learnt the most when they were struggling. And it's obviously, if you're in that uncomfortable position, it's uncomfortable for a reason. It's because you're doing something that you haven't done before. You're pushing yourself. And for most people, that should really be a good thing. If you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone and trying something, that should be seen as a positive, really. It's something particularly in gyms, I wish was done a little bit better. There's kind of this almost this like mentality in gyms that, oh, what's this person doing here? They don't know how to use this kit. And you kind of, whereas those people should be thinking, you know what, I was that person once where I came into the gym, I didn't really know what I was doing, rather than kind of looking at them for the weird way they might be using a piece of equipment. Why don't I go over and just introduce myself and see if I can help? See if they, because they might not know what they're doing is wrong, or what they're doing is maybe not the most efficient way to do it. So that I think there needs to be a more welcoming, certainly kind of more of a community feel. Luckily, the gym I am at now is fantastic for that. I know if there's someone in there that's kind of maybe new, and they're looking around, and maybe they're even unsure on where a piece of equipment is, I can guarantee you that one of the members will be going up to them, introducing themselves, and kind of asking if there's anywhere they can help. And it helps that transition for that person they've taken the first step. The first step is often the hardest step. They've got into the gym. Once they're there, we kind of really need to do everything we can to make them feel welcomed and help them on their journey, and appreciate that, yeah, they're probably not feeling that great. They're probably quite nervous. They don't really know what they're doing. So we need to try and help them through that stage as much as possible.
Yeah, because I think working through that is where that, like you said, that's where growth and lessons really can be learned that are very valuable. And so if people wanted to, if they wanted to connect with you or find out more about your work, be that in golf or strength conditioning, otherwise, where are the best places for people to find that online, on social or on your website? Where would you recommend people go to?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. So JG Golf Fitness on all of them. I think I'm JG_Golf Fitness on Instagram. I have my website, jggolffitness.co.uk, and I am very active on all of them. So I mean, I'm posting on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook every day, and I certainly feel that I would like to say that I'm someone that engages with people. I'm not someone that puts up a post and then ignores every comment or any questions. I'm always trying to get people to comment on things, to ask me questions. So my inboxes, the kind of the direct messages, etc., are always open. If people want to, they have a question, send it over to me. I will always get back to people and try and help where I can.
That's absolutely brilliant. We'll put the links to all of your social and your website in the show notes below. But Jamie, that was absolutely brilliant. I think just a lot of people would have been scratching their heads at the beginning of the idea of, golf, strength conditioning. This sounds a bit unusual. But just I think the way you unpacked it in terms of the very serious physical demands of golf and actually the scope for improvement there, but also your overall mindset and approach to training. I think it can benefit athletes at so many levels in almost any sport. So thank you for making the time and for sharing all that so brilliantly.
No problem. Thank you for having me on. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Jamie Greaves, folks, give that man a big hand. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And absolutely love that fact. Next time someone's talking about how lazy and lardy golf players are, while that is going to be true of some of them, I just love Jamie's point there that anyone who is swinging a golf club at any serious level, they're taking an object from stationary to anywhere between 100 and 130 miles an hour of movement within 0.2 of a second before bringing it back to zero in under a second. There isn't a Formula One car on the planet that can do that. The human body is a marvellous thing, something we should all be proud to have, and we need to give our utmost attention, joy, and life to. So look, I hope Jamie's tips there are going to help you build the base of your pyramid, and when you need the best possible natural sports nutrition to fuel all of your activities, your performance, and your health, well, you know where to go. It's all ready and waiting for you at 33fuel.com. Thanks very much for tuning in and look forward to catching you on the next show.